All right, we're just gonna get this done, guys. This is B8. I don't think we'll get through all of it. So last section of biology, I don't think we're going to do the plant response systems, but we'll just look at water transport in plants. So it says there, recall. So the vascular bundle, we haven't really talked too much about it other than when we were labeling the diagram. So the vascular bundle is made up of xylem and phloem. And we talked a little bit about the fact that xylem is transporting things from the root upwards, so water and minerals, and the phloem is kind of transporting things from the leaves to the rest of the plant. So the vessels are not only present in the leaf, but also in the roots and stems of the plant. So xylem overall are composed of dead cells with cell walls. So these dead cells can form a continuous tube or vessel that extends from the roots to the rest of the plant. So the way that I kind of think of it is if you had a whole bunch of straws and you basically stuck the end of one straw into the other end of the next and just created this really long tube throughout the plant. So they're dead cells, they're not actually living, but they allow this water transport. So water and minerals from the soil enter the plant through the epidermis of the roots and then flow up the xylem tissue to the leaves. So that epidermis of the roots, the epidermal or kind of the skin layer of the roots, allows that water transport in. So it's based on osmotic pressure, we'll talk about that, and that will allow transport throughout the plant. So without the xylem to perform water transport, the plant would not be able to do, oh, hopefully you can see that, that's really light. So it says, without the xylem to perform water transport, the plant would not be able to perform photosynthesis, so it would wilt and it would die. Much sadness. So the movement of water and minerals in the xylem, so there's just a little concept map so you can kind of fill it out. So the water as a fluid or a liquid in the soil, it enters the cells of the root epidermis by osmosis. So that's back to lesson B4, I believe. So that movement of water with its or down its concentration gradient. So the water diffuses, so diffusion through the root tissues until it reaches the xylem tissues. And from there, the water pressure in the root builds. And so that's osmotic pressure within the root, or you can call it root pressure as well. So that's saying the root is taking in all of this water. That water is essentially creating pressure within it, and the water moves up the plant. So we know that it's pretty hard to move things up though against gravity. And so there's kind of a couple different factors that allow the water to move up the plant. I think we have it on the next page as well. So we have cohesive forces. So cohesive is between water molecules. So what that's saying is one water molecule is actually kind of attracting the next water molecule is attracting the next. So those are attractive forces between the water molecules, and that's keeping everything together. So these water molecules are essentially kind of linking hands. So as one water molecule goes up, it's pulling the next one with it. So that's part of it. Adhesive forces are actually, so if you think of adhesion, that's like sticking, right? So what that actually is the water molecules actually stick to the outsides of those xylem tissues. So those adhesive forces are those water molecules, again, are sticking to those outer sides of the tube that it's in, the xylem tube, and it sticks to the edges of it. And you can actually see that when you, if you put water in like a really skinny tube, again, a bio demo that we look at, it actually kind of, it'll stick up the sides. And if you look at the level of the water, it's, sorry, I don't have a smart notebook file open to draw this. And this will probably take forever to open. But the water will actually stick to those outer surfaces of the xylem tissue. So if we, okay, oh, so if you have water in a really small tube, like a capillary tube, which I have at school, these are the sides of it. even when you're looking at in some of our measuring cylinders, water actually what it does, let's make it blue because we think water is blue. I know when we did stuff with graduated cylinders before, I said you always look at the level. This is called the meniscus. But if you look, water actually is higher up on the two edges than it is in the middle. And that's, again, because of these adhesive forces. So that's adhesion, that it sticks to those walls. So adhesion kind of helps it stick to the walls of the xylem tissue in this case. Root pressure. And so root pressure, again, is based on this part here, there's a lot of water moving into the root, so it's kind of pushing on the water molecules that have already found their way to the xylem. And then the really big one is transpiration. So at the level of the leaves, it's basically kind of sucking the water up. It's pulling the water up the stem. So these four reasons are why the water moves against gravity. So it's being pulled from the leaves for photosynthesis. It's being pushed by the roots due to root pressure, that osmotic pressure. And the reason that it all stays together is those water molecules hang on to each other, but they also hang on to the walls of the xylem and they can kind of climb up that way. And so that, oh, pulled off the edge. Oh yeah, it did on mine too. So it says transpiration of water as vapor from the leaves via osmosis. That's kind of this part, but from there, so water moves up to the leaves, then this is again what's happening with water. So we have transpiration occurring and water leaves the plant as a vapor or gas. That's what it says. Water leaves plant as vapor or gas. Kind of cut off on mine as well. So this is kind of a diagram of what's happening at the level, at all of these levels. So, ooh, zoom, 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 zoom. So just to kind of talk from the root upwards, so we know the roots have root hairs. This is increasing the surface area of the roots. A tree doesn't just have like a happy tree. It doesn't just, that's the grass, that's blue. It doesn't just have one root because that's not very many surfaces for water and minerals to be coming in. What a tree actually has is an entire root system that branches out from a main root. So it has a main root, and then from there it'll have roots off that, and then it'll have little hairs off that, and little hairs off that, and so again, that is increasing the surface area for osmosis and diffusion. So there are more surfaces for water to be coming into the roots and for other minerals from the soil to be diffusing across the membranes of the roots into the plant. So that's what this part is. So these little dark gray parts are soil, and then there's water housed within that, and that wants to move into the root hair. And so once it, once osmosis allows it to move across, those water molecules want to find their way to the phloem. Sorry, the xylem. So this is the xylem, so that's what it's kind of representing. So you see it's kind of a hollow tube. Again, I said it's like multiple straws stuck together, so that's why you see a little bit of a kind of defined part in between that, but again, water can keep moving up that. So water is held together by cohesion, so that's saying one water molecule holds on to the next water molecule, and adhesion keeps the xylem in place. I'd say adhesion keeps the water in place in the xylem. So this is representing it. So this little thing that looks like an upside down Mickey Mouse head is water. So these two little dots are hydrogen, the big dot is oxygen, and that holds on to the next water molecule. So these two little dots are hydrogen, the big dot is oxygen. So this is cohesion. They hold on to each other. Adhesion is each water molecule, or the outermost water molecule, are going to be holding on to the cell wall of the xylem. So that's adhesion. And then again, so we have all of these, we have root pressure pushing it up. We have cohesion, holding water molecules together. We have adhesion, holding the water molecules to the cell walls of the xylem. And then the big force is that transpiration. So up at the level of the leaves, it is pulling the water up in order to allow photosynthesis to occur. So this is the transpiration pull. And then just labeling a couple things. So the mesophyll, again, is that middle layer. That's your palisade in your spongy tissue. This is also representing the stoma, and the water molecules. In this case, these water molecules are leaving due to transpiration. So that's what that diagram is. If you need to pause it and write down that stuff, go ahead. We'll just keep flying along. Oh, this is tying in those four things from that the page before. I'll just scroll back to what I was talking about. So these four reasons that water and minerals move up are due to these parts. So what helps water travel up the stem? Cohesion. Again, attractive forces between water molecules. So that's one water molecule to the next. Adhesion or adhesive forces are the attractive forces between the water molecules and the molecules of a surface. In this case, it's between water molecules and the surface of the xylem, or the walls of the xylem. Also, root pressure. Oops. So the root pressure, or the osmotic pressure, is the turgor pressure inside the root xylem, forces the water up the stem. And transpiration. As water evaporates from the surface of leaf cells, so out of those open stomata, or those open guard cells, cohesion forces will force the water up the xylem vessels in the leaf to replace the water that has evaporated. So as transpiration occurs, as water is being lost, it's pulling more water up to replace it. So as a result, more water is pulled up other xylem vessels to the leaf. This is called transpiration pull. So we've got water. Now let's talk about sugars. So phloem, we've talked about xylem as moving water and other minerals. Phloem is the food or sugar conducting tissue in vascular plants that transports dissolved sugar around the plant. So that sugar that was produced in photosynthesis is transported around the plant. In general, a sugar source is a plant organ in which sugar is being made by photosynthesis, or the breakdown of starch. The big thing is photosynthesis. So sugar sources, what's producing sugar is leaves, mature leaves, but leaves in general. A sugar sink, so we're talking sources and sinks here. So leaves are the sources of sugar. A sugar sink is an organ that consumes sugar or stores sugar. So growing roots consume and store sugar. Shoot tips consume and store sugar. Stems consume and store sugar. And fruit is a really big storage organ for sugar. So it needs to get from the leaves, which is the source, to whatever the sink is. And there's lots of sinks within a plant. So phloem is the tissue that allows that to happen. So within our vascular bundle, so the vessels of phloem tissue are arranged end to end, and they're connected by sieve plates. So you can think of them kind of like xylem, but they're not open tube. So they have these things called sieve plates in between them, and they're kind of like a strainer. I don't have a good analogy on the top of my head, but they're kind of like a strainer. So it's just like an end. If you have a straw, like we had in xylem, and it has ends on it that have little pores or openings within it. So those are the sieve plates. But unlike xylem, phloem cells are actually alive. So water and minerals have been transported by the xylem, therefore the plant is ready for photosynthesis. I don't know why that is in the middle there, but we have photosynthesis occurring. Now we need to move sugar. So it says movement of the phloem sap. So fill in the concept map that outlines the movement of phloem sap. So phloem sap is sugar, nutrients, minerals, a little bit of water as well. And so this diagram has, it's again kind of from the textbook, simplifies how sugar is transported in a typical plant. So photosynthesis. So in the palisade cells, mostly in the mesophyll, also a little bit in the spongy tissue cells, sugars are made. Sugars move into the phloem due to diffusion. So there is phloem and xylem cells within the leaf. Sugars move into the phloem. Water flows into the phloem by osmosis, which increases the pressure in the phloem. And what actually happens is the sap will flow down the concentration gradient. So it's moving from an area of high concentration of sap within the leaf to an area of low concentration of sap. So whether that's the stem or the roots or whatever it would be. So fluid pressure forces phloem sap into phloem cell walls in neighboring cells. Oops, I always press it one time too many. And from there, once the phloem sap is moved to whatever its sink is, again, whether it's a fruit or a stem, the nutrients and sugars are used within that. I think I have a little more. Ooh. Okay, this has just a little bit more of that information that I was kind of saying if you want to pause and copy those out. So in part A, at the level of the leaf, so now we're going from kind of top down. So sugars enter the phloem in the leaf. This creates a concentration gradient. So water will flow into the phloem. Again, by osmosis. The sugars are removed from the phloem tissues of the plant. This is when it reaches its, whatever its sink is. So in this case, the sink is the stem. So sugars are removed by the tissues of the plant. So at the level of the stem, the sugar concentration decreases. So water follows out of the phloem by osmosis, and the pressure in the phloem will decrease. And the pressure gradient from the leaf to the root causes the flow of sugars from the leaf to the root. So this is two different sinks in that case. Ooh, so it says, I just wrote this. So remember, sugars are used in three ways within the plant. So as an energy source. So if the cells undergo cellular respiration, that's creating energy in the form of ATP. Sugars are also stored as starch, so mainly in the roots, or as they can also be used for cellulose. And so that's important for the cell walls and for the structure of the plant overall. So the rest of B8 is actually, sorry, I'm just kind of looking, what are called plant tropisms. And I'm not going to go over all of the plant tropism stuff. I've left that off just because we've done a lot. We're kind of running out of time. But you can look up plant tropisms. That's how plants respond to sunlight or to touch or to gravity. So those are plant control systems. So you can look it up. It's actually kind of the most interesting part, but not really critical for moving forward in biology or other science courses. So you can look up a video of a nastic response or a gravitrophic response or any of that stuff, or sleep movements. Did you know that plants respond and have sleep movements? It's pretty cool. So you can work on that last worksheet. So it tied together both movement of sugars and movement of gases that we would have done in B8. And that's your last worksheet. And then there's a little bit of a review worksheet from just for bio in general, and then you'll have your unit test. So good luck. We'll talk to you later.